So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Kevin Gazzara. Kevin graduated from Drexel in 1979 with a bachelor's degree in commerce and engineering and has built a 30-year career in management, leadership, organizational development, and teaching experience in industries spanning from heavy equipment to high tech. He'll share much more of his background and story with you during the presentation. I'm pleased to welcome Kevin and turn the program over to him.
Thank you, Lauren, and I can see all the attendees on the list and the other people calling in. I hope to make this a very interactive session for you. Lauren mentioned if you do have questions, I would encourage you to post them through the chat. Lauren's going to be good enough to monitor those for me. The intention is that we'll hold about 15 minutes at the end of the seminar to answer all of the questions. If there's something that comes up urgent during the session, we can take a brief pause, but I have plenty of time baked into the end to answer the questions. So thank you, and let's get started. I want to talk to the agenda here. And before I do that, I want to thank the Drexel Alumni Association for the opportunity to kind of bring this topic to you. I mean, we do have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to try to go very fast. Also, I think as Lauren mentioned, this material will be available for you after the webinar, so if something comes up and you can't write some particular information down quick enough, you'll be able to access this. So for today's session, I'll provide you a brief background and introduction so you know what kind of questions I can answer. And then we're going to move actually into 4 different phases. And the first phase is what I call analyze. We'll use this to discuss career choices and then for you to get an understanding of your own sustainable competitive advantage, or what I'll refer to later and throughout the presentation as an SCA. In the second phase, we'll discuss the design, and this is the design of your roadmap on how do you develop and enhance your sustainable competitive advantage, and how can we position you for success. We have a surprise guest for you. We'll share her success story with you early on in the presentation, so she'll talk to you about how she went through these different phases, particularly about the design of her own program. Third, we'll talk about acting. How do you put this design in place, and how do you define elements of success? And last but not least, we'll talk about measurements and creating metrics. And this is a phase that we usually leave out. We usually get through the analyze, design, and then jump into it and then just hope for the best. That's ideally not the best way to do that. So we'll give you some tips on how to do this. So in the consulting firm that we have, we call this the ATOM model, and it's really designed for you systems thinkers to be a reinforcing cycle so that each phase of this model builds upon the previous. It's a circular model, and the whole design is to create continuous improvement. So I wanted to keep it simple, easy to remember, and we find that when people have acronyms, they'll remember them much easier. So if we're able to get through the agenda, we should be able to meet these 5 important objectives, giving you a deeper understanding about understanding your passion, how to analyze your potential. So what do I have, or what do I have talents or skills for that would allow me to reach my full potential? How do you develop your plan? How do you actually act on your plan so you get the right kind of feedback? And then how do we measure success? Lauren gave you a very brief introduction. I asked her to just be brief because I had some of this prepared. I wanted to tell you, first of all, that I love what I do every day of my life. And this really happened, if any of you have read Stephen Covey's work, it's by keeping the end in mind. So in my mid-30s, I decided that I wanted to retire at 50 and share with others what I had learned to help them with their own success. And for me, this meant I needed to move from the corporate world into consulting and teaching. So first of all, my work history, which I used for building my practical experience, I worked at Transamerica, De Laval, and IMO Industries for 10 years in Trenton, New Jersey, and then had the opportunity to start with Intel in Princeton and eventually move to Phoenix, Arizona, where I am currently. About 3 years ago, and I had a wonderful career at Intel, did a lot of different things from product management, product marketing, managed Intel University. The last 6 years there I spent managing Intel's worldwide management leadership development. It was a wonderful place to work. I learned a lot. I made a lot of good friends and had several good mentors during that period of time. About 3 years ago, myself and 2 other colleagues decided that we wanted to go out and do what we had been doing for Intel. And we started Magna Leadership Solutions, which is a consulting firm for management and leadership that we work with Fortune 100 companies from all over the world, help them through doing workshops, developing programs for them, assessments, coaching, and speaking. As Lauren mentioned, I got my Commerce and Engineering degree from Drexel and feel very fortunate to be an alumni. After that, I went to evening school while I was working at Transamerica to finish my MBA. It's at 1983. And then I was fortunate enough, I started teaching at the University of Phoenix in 1996. And when they brought out their Doctor of Management program, 10 of us started. We were essentially the guinea pigs to try that out. I was able to complete my doctorate in organizational leadership and management in 2.5 years. And this was an online and residency on-site program, and I did my dissertation on job satisfaction, employee motivation, and engagement to create high-performing teams. And this is what really set me up to be successful with my SCA for consulting. So I've been teaching, as I mentioned before, since 1996. I teach online and on ground. I'm teaching at 4 different universities at the moment, and very pleased to say just recently, last month, I started teaching at Drexel University in the Masters of Engineering Management program. One thing I will tell everyone is teaching is absolutely a fantastic way to learn and build an incredible network, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in here. So I wanted to start the session off with something a little bit light, and I found these charts that I'm going to show you in a moment on a site called graphjam.com. Now, these are created somewhat cynically by users, but often I find that the cynicism holds a grain of truth. So I do a fair amount of coaching, and this first graph just made me laugh when I saw it. And I'm not actually going to poll the group here for the accuracy, because I'm not sure that I even want to know people on the line whether this is true or not. But if you take a look at the group, at the graph, over time and the prestige that you had intended, you have the top line is your intended career path, and then this particular person drew his or her career line in the red with that big gap area in the yellow of why they drink. So once again, a little bit cynical, but I thought it was humorous and not too far from the truth from some of the people that I've been coaching. So the second graph that I'm going to show you, also from the same site, looks something like this. Jobs that I've had in the red, jobs that I went to college for, which is in the green, and then jobs that I wanted, which is in the blue. Also kind of put a smile on my face. But what I found is most of my green and blue circles have been inside the red circle. And today, my hope is to give you some tips on how do we move your circles, the blue and green circles, into the red circle. So with that, I'm going to ask Lauren to bring up our first poll. And what I'd like to know from you real quickly, and this will be the first of 4 polls that we'll do, so if you're paying attention, you'll be able to participate. What I'd like to know is, what is your level of motivation at your current job? So things are coming in. Take a minute here. Get 13 out of the 19. Probably still have a few people getting coffee, or either that or in deep thought. And it looks like we're just going to get the 13 out of 19. Okay. So as you can see from the results, almost 70% of you say that your level of job motivation in your current job is exceptionally low to moderate, with only about 30% that was high or extra high. So that's very interesting research. So that's one of the reasons that I hope to provide you some of the discussions today on this webinar. So how do we change that so that you can raise your level of job motivation? There's lots of tools to do that. We'll share some of those with you today. Okay, thanks, Lauren, for the poll. And let's move to the next slide. So what's driving change here? The Opinion Research Group in Princeton says that 80% of the American adults would consider leaving their jobs if they had other opportunities. And from that last poll, I suspect that that's probably true for 70% here. Okay. Now, this to me is a significant problem. As we saw from your results, there's some room to help with your motivation as well. Also, Right Management in Philadelphia says that 60% of the people intend to leave if the economy changes, and 21% of you are already networking. So those are some startling statistics, and also some disturbing statistics for those of you that are managers, and then also probably those of you that are coworkers, knowing that maybe 80% of the people around you are not going to be there if the economy turns. And the good news is, if you looked at the stock market this morning, it looks like we're continuously getting some additional indicators that things are moving in the right direction. Lauren, I'll ask you to pull up our second of the 4 polls, and let's get some information from you. So what percentage of additional work are you doing today versus 2 years ago? So how much more work do you think you have? You can begin your poll. Good. Got 16 out of 19. I guess I'm one in there. So the survey says it looks like we have about 60% of the people are anywhere between 2 and 25%, but 30% are doing 25 to 40%. Nice to see that people aren't getting 50% more work. So obviously many of you are getting tapped a little bit, but not to an extreme degree. Lauren, thanks for the poll. And let's see what also is driving the change here. This particular statistic from Career Builder was a little surprising to me, and I thought it would be interesting for you to see today, that they said that 37% of us from their research are doing the work of 2 people. I mean, it's no wonder that the U.S. productivity is on the rise, as they're squeezing that last ounce of blood out of all our employees. And because of that, they also found out that 30% of you are burned out. So I think there was only one person that had a slight increase in the additional work or less work than they had 2 years ago. But organizations are trying to figure out, how do we get more people to give us more time, more effort, more energy without rewarding them accordingly? So some of the things that you should know, if you want to stay motivated, engaged, fulfilled, each of us seeks all 3 of these, is some autonomy, so some control of what you're doing, mastery of, this is kind of getting better at what you do continuously, and some kind of feedback mechanism that you know you're doing that, and a sense of purpose. So with those 3 elements in mind, keep those in mind as we talk throughout the rest of the day. If we talk about understanding your sustainable competitive advantage, so in April I published an article called Understanding Your Sustainable Competitive Advantage, and since that time I've been coaching many of my friends and colleagues who have been between jobs, and they constantly tell me that they're unemployed, but I tell them to think of that as really as much more of their consulting. So don't tell people you're unemployed. Tell them that you're consulting currently. And what they tell me is, yeah, they're consulting the One Ads and Monster.com and Jobs.com and so forth. So when I've interviewed them, I've asked them 3 questions. The first question was, if you were interviewing for a job, what would be the 5 reasons that I should hire you? And this is what I hear from almost everyone. Well, I'm a hard worker, I'm a self-starter, I'm a good team player, I'm a fast learner, and the list goes on and on. Once the interviewee has kind of exhausted all of his or her attributes, then I move to the next question, which is, so what would you expect the next interviewee to tell me that's different than what you just told me? And this is where I got this response. Well, or just complete silence. And that should be an indicator for you if what you said in the first question, you get this response into the second question. And then I finally asked them the third question, which is, what's your sustainable competitive advantage? What do you have that's so unique that I can't get this from anyone else? And the response to this question is typically the same as response to question number 2. I'd like you to think about that today if you've answered those questions in a similar manner. So normally I would give you one of my success stories, but I have solicited a special guest for you today. So Glinda, the Good Witch of the East from the Wizard of Oz, or more commonly known as Melissa Conforti, is here on the line, and she's going to tell her story on how she developed her career and her sustainable competitive advantage. Normally we do this at the end of the webinar, but Melissa can only stay with us until 1/2 the hour. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa. Melissa, are you on?
I am. Thanks, Kevin. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Conforti, and I am Galinda here in the photograph. That was Halloween last year. But I'm based in Silicon Valley, and I'm currently working for a high-tech company. As you can see here, I've worked for a number of them over the past few years. Currently setting up a center of excellence around organizational change management. And I'm really excited to have this chance to join you today, and I hope that my story can help inspire you to find your own sustainable competitive advantage. So let's travel down the yellow brick road back to 2001. I met Kevin when I was in Oregon and participating in a management leadership development program at Intel. And at the time, I was working as a supply planning manager. And I was in a role that I didn't particularly enjoy, but frankly, I was pretty good at it. And I'd allowed my career to be dictated by my management, who kept promoting me, and yet I knew I didn't want to build my career in that field. And I don't know if that's ever happened to any of you, but you build your skills, you do a good job, you get nice pay raises, and then you kind of feel stuck. So to add to that situation, I was also pregnant, and I was anticipating the need for more flexibility than the typical 24/7 nature of manufacturing operations. So when I was at this conference, I reached out to Kevin because I liked his style of asking thoughtful, direct questions, and I asked him to be my mentor. At the time, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, just that I didn't like the trajectory that I was currently on. So we created a mentoring contract, and it helped us hold ourselves accountable and set clear expectations for what that mentoring relationship would be. So with Kevin's guidance, I went through every possible self-assessment you can imagine. Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, you name it, I did it. And I identified all of my interests, priorities, and strengths. And I really enjoyed that part. That was fun. I like doing those sort of things. But what came out of that led me to narrow down my career options into the field of organizational development, or OD. But I knew I had a lot to learn if I wanted to make that move. In the past, I'd been a supply planner. I was in the supply chain world. Prior to that, I was managing the Latin American operations for a company. I knew nothing about OD, really. So coming from a planning background, Excel was my tool of choice. So I made a list of all of the competencies in Excel that would be required for a position OD. I color-coded each competency based on how much of a gap I thought I had, and at the end, it kind of looked like a red, yellow, green dashboard, if you've ever seen anything like that. So then, what I did was I set out to create a plan for how to transition from where I was to where I wanted to be. I already had an MBA, and with my expanding family responsibilities and my student debt, I couldn't afford to go back to school, which was kind of the natural choice to get into that field. A lot of people who go into OD have their master's or their doctorate in psychology or in OD itself, and that just wasn't an option from my perspective. So I had to get creative. And with Kevin, we sat down and he helped me formulate a plan. So one of the first things we did was identify a list of people that worked in my field of interest within Intel, which is where I was. And I set up one-on-one informational interviews with all those people. And as I met with them, I asked them things about what they actually did to validate for myself that that was really what I was interested in doing. And what skills were most valued in that field, both from their perspective as well as who they would be looking for if they were hiring someone into that area. And what kind of internal training they would recommend. And whether there were any certification programs that were respected in that field. And I went through, I don't know, probably 15, 20 interviews like that and gathered all of that data. And after I'd completed my series of interviews, I looked through all of the feedback. Some of it confirmed what we'd already concluded, and that was that I had some core skills that were really valuable in that field of OD. That was great. Very validating, felt good. But one of the things that I learned through this process is you really need to focus on your strengths and hone them. And strengths are like flowers in a garden. This is my favorite analogy around strengths. They're like flowers in a garden. And if you tend to them, they will blossom and they will thrive. But you can't forget to take care of the weeds, because even though strengths are really important and it's important to focus on them, if you don't take care of those weeds, which are your gaps or the areas that are really going to overshadow your strengths, they can kind of choke out or diminish the value of those strengths. So what I did was I identified what my gaps were, and one of those gaps was facilitation skills. And at the time, I literally would break out in a sweat if I had to stand in front of a room, and my voice would crack, and I'd be very nervous. My hands would shake, so I didn't want to hold papers in my hand because my hands would kind of tremble. And this was a really important thing for me to get over, because facilitation skills are a core part of organizational development, and it'd be required to be a successful professional in that area. So what did I do? I took internal training on some of the facilitation techniques that project teams use. I took HR classes on organizational behavior and org design process. All of these things were offered within Intel, so I had access to these classes. I also took a presentation skills class where they videotape you, and then they pick apart how you present in front of the class, and that was really brutal. I hated that class. And I was lucky, because Intel offered those classes internally, they didn't have an out-of-pocket cost for me. And if you're in this situation and your company doesn't offer those kind of classes, I'd highly recommend looking online. There's a lot more available online today than there was before. Check out a community college, maybe go to a conference, see if your boss will fund that, or even work one-on-one with someone who's an expert to tutor you, because I did find some people who are experts along the way, and it really does help to have someone who can, give you advice and kind of mentor you through that process. But an important thing to realize is that knowledge isn't enough. And really, to build a skill, you need to practice. So I found opportunities while I was still in my old role to get more comfortable facilitating. I volunteered to teach new employee orientation at Intel, and I led team discussions within the teams that I was on, and I even volunteered to do it for a few other teams. And I even became a facilitator at that management leadership development program where I met Kevin. And I did that for a few years, and I absolutely loved it. Probably the area where I felt like I built most of my facilitation strengths. But most of all, these things were outside of my current job responsibilities. And so I really needed to make sure that my boss understood that I was trying to develop in these areas and get him bought into that was part of my development plan, and then also assure him that I wasn't going to let my day job go to the wayside and I wasn't going to slack on that. So I really had to make that effort to keep up my day job while I was, doing these extracurricular things to build my skills. And it really was worth it. So, one by one, I went through each of the competencies in my dashboard and checked it off as I completed my different educational and experiential opportunities that I'd put on my to-do list. And this really wasn't an overnight endeavor. It took me a couple of years to really develop my skills in this area, especially because I was doing it on the side. But I was focused and I was persistent. I didn't put it on my I'll do it tomorrow thing. Every week I had something that I was trying to either schedule or do around this area. And after a while, my dashboard was nearly green, and a job opportunity came up, and they were looking for an OD professional in the supply chain group where I'd been working before, and it was like the perfect opportunity. I'll be honest, I was almost embarrassed and a little afraid to put my name in the running because I knew I wasn't an expert, and there were other experienced OD practitioners who were going up for the job, and it was going to be a long shot. But I also knew that it would be a perfect transition for me because I knew the leaders in that organization, I knew the people in the organization, and I knew what the people in those roles did, and it would really be an ideal scenario if someone would have the faith in me and if I could put forward everything that I'd done to build my skills in that area. So, where did that get me? Well, I got the job that I'd hoped to get, and it was great. I enjoyed every single minute of it. Unfortunately, the role ended up being swept into human resources right at a time while they were restructuring, and I was laid off a little more than a year later. So all that glitters down that yellow brick path is not always gold. But I can say that with me, in my case, I was able to get the experience and the credentials to pursue my passion. So even in that short amount of time, after having built my skills over a couple of years and then having an opportunity internal to my own company, I was able to launch a new career for myself. And I've had various OD positions, primarily in the area of change management. And I have been laid off from other companies, but every time I have changed, I've had a much-needed break, and then I've had a chance to advance my career and advance my salary. And it's really given me the opportunity to develop my expertise in a niche that is valuable to almost every organization and across many, many industries, because things are always changing. And most companies don't know how to effectively manage change well. And that's really the area that I've gotten into. So I love my job. You know, when we took that poll, I was one of those that marked the highly motivated, because I absolutely love it. And I feel like I make a difference with the things that I do. I have the flexibility that I was seeking. And honestly, I probably work harder now than I did when I was in my supply chain job. But that hard work is driven by passion. I feel like I have a sustainable competitive advantage that I can take with me no matter where I work in the future. So that's my story.
Okay, Melissa. Well, thank you very much for the story. Hopefully it's given some people on the line some ideas. I know you have a 9:30 meeting appointment, so I'm going to let you go here, and if there are any questions that you have for Melissa, we'll capture those, and I'll be glad to send them to you later today.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Have a wonderful day.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye. So before we go on to the next slide, you know, I spent the first 17 years of my life in marketing, and I know what I need to do is understand my customers and my audience. So, Lauren, let's go to the third of the fourth polling questions and see if some of your aspirations are similar to what Melissa had done. So my ultimate aspirations are to, and then just pick one of those. Okay, is it continue in your current job, move into management or higher level management, become a consultant or a teacher as well, or to own your own business? Let's see where we are. About 50% of you are getting ready to move into management. 25% want to own your own business, and 25% want to be a consultant or teach. So about a 50-50 split today. So we'll give you some tools, tips and tricks for both of those categories, whether you're going to stay in the corporate world and move into management or go in independently. All right, let's move on to the next one. So choosing your path down the yellow brick road, keeping the theme Melissa started us with. So as you choose your path down the yellow brick road, there's two significant forks that you're going to come to in the road, just like Dorothy did when she met the scarecrow. The first is, do you stay a part of the organizational world? I'm saying organizational world, so this can be profit or nonprofit, public or private. So one of the things is, since I lived in the organizational world, corporate world for almost 30 years, many people think it has a lot of disadvantages, but one of the things you have to consider before you exit that world, which many of you I suspect are in at the moment, such as steady income. You know, usually have a retirement plan or a 401k. They provide health care. It's predictable. Things that people forget is provides a community for you. And then, as Melissa had mentioned, provides learning resources. So are you going to stay in the organizational world and be an individual contributor, which everyone on this call said they weren't going to be doing that they were either going to move into management, or the second fork in the road, which means becoming independent. So do you want to develop your own skill or move into management? If you decide that you're going to be independent, here are some options. You know, you can be a consultant or a contractor. Once again, I will put education here as well as you're going to become an adjunct professor such as I am? Or would you want to be an owner and kind of own your own business? Most of the advantages in the organizational world are disadvantages in this world in particular. From the last poll, I can see that we pretty much have a strong interest, 50-50 split in both of these. Let's address the first group. So talk about managing and becoming a manager. And this is one of the things that I learned as part of the discussion in the Drexel course I'm currently teaching for engineering management, is they talk about different skills that you need in order to become a manager. The first skill is conceptual skills. This is as you start in your entry-level management, moving to senior management, there is an expectation that your conceptual skills or seeing the big picture and kind of extracting yourself from the minutia is on the increase. The second, or technical expertise skills, become less important. They're less used. They're not less important, but they're less used as the mix of your daily basis changes as you go up the management chain. So as a senior manager, you're probably using more conceptual skills than you're using technical or expertise skills. And the third is interpersonal skills. And this is needed at all levels of management. And you have to have a relative proficiency at this. And as you go up in senior management, it's additional. So as you're thinking about your sustainable competitive advantage, which of these three do you want to work on, or do you want to work on all three? Now, if you're considering consulting for managers or going into the consulting business and you want to move into the consulting world, what you're going to realize is that pretty much all three of these skills are going to be equally as important. So as you're deciding on your SCA, decide which one or all three of these can you stand out in. In interpersonal relationships, do you have this ability to see the big picture through the trees, or do you have some technical or expertise skills that just can only be found in a small percentage of the world? Moving along, for those that have thought of becoming a consultant, we're going to go through this quickly, and I'm going to read a series of 10 questions. Hopefully you have a piece of paper and a pencil. You don't have to write the questions down. I'm going to ask you to score each one of these questions. So I'd like you to answer these questions in the way you believe the people that know you best would answer them. I know if we answer them the way we think, it tends to be a little bit higher. But the more honest you are, the better discussion that we'll have in the Q&A session. Scale is at the bottom. So if I ask you a question and it's not at all true, put a 1, just a small degree, 2, 3 is about average, 4 is to a large degree, and 5 is exceptionally. Here are the questions. We'll add these up at the end, and then we'll do a poll. So keep writing your numbers. We'll do this quickly. Pencil in hand, ready? First question, how strong is your network of people outside of your organizations? 1 to 5. Second question, how strong are you at prospecting or creating new opportunities that don't exist? Third question, how strong are your interpersonal skills? How well do you deal with people? Fourth question, how tolerant are you of rejection? For 4, how tolerant are you of rejection? How well do you deal with people that say no and you have to continue? 5, how unique are your talents or skills? 6, how financially stable are you for 18 to 36 months? Most people don't realize is there's this gestation period for starting a consulting firm that you have to be pretty financially stable to be able to handle the startup. 7, how would you be considered as a strong self-starter? Do you need a lot of prodding, or it's pretty much you're left on your own and you're good? 8, how strong is your ability to prioritize and focus? Do you get distracted easily, or are you good, as Melissa is? She was exceptional prioritizing and focusing. 9, how strong is your passion for this future work? So do you have the passion, also like Melissa talked about, that this is the thing that gets her out of bed in the morning and drives what she wants to do? And the last question, 10, how broad is your business knowledge? Are you pretty good at one thing, or do you have a broad enough business knowledge to run a business? Do you understand the finance, marketing, production, the design, sales? How broad is that? I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to add up your scores. And then once you come out with a number, so your number should be anywhere between 10 and 50, 50 being exceptional and 10 being kind of not at all. And as you have your scores, just put yourself in these different categories. So the numbers are coming in. So actually, when I've done this before, these scores are much higher than the other people. So obviously Drexel must attract probably the best and the brightest. Or at least that's what they told me when I went to school back in the 70s. So looks like it's still happening. So 73% of you had 30 to 39 score, or close to a large degree. If that's a true, honest score for you, you would be in very good position to begin your own consulting firm or to go out and do contracting work. All right, let's continue because we're real close to the end here. So one thing I wanted to share with you, particularly since many of you are set up for success and half of you are interested in consulting tips and tricks. I was fortunate enough in 2004 to become part of an organization called Target Training International, and they have 6,000 people in their network who are licensed to do assessments, many of the assessments that Melissa talked about. They actually licensed my assessment tool that I created for my doctoral dissertation that statistically determines the ideal job alignment for maximized job satisfaction, engagement, and motivation. So the good news is I joined that organization in 2004. I learned a lot from these colleagues, and some of their tips I'm going to show you here. The rest I've developed myself in our consulting firm over the last 3 years. This will help finish the development stage of the ADA model. So set yourself up today for the future. Here are the 5 recommendations. First of all, identify and develop your intellectual property. So what are you particularly good at, and what do you have the passion for? The second, as Melissa talked about, is obtain your credentials, whether it's a degree, whether it's a certification. Figure out what you need in the future and go about getting them today so you can establish your retirement or your next phase of life date. Develop and cultivate your network. That's the one thing that I found is I continued cultivating my network while I was at Transamerica and Intel, and I've maintained the contacts. Get yourself overly visible, both inside and outside your network. Let people know who you are, what you do, where your passion is. And the last thing is be a resource for others. So help them be successful. Usually when they're successful, they're going to drag you along with their success. And this has worked incredibly well for me. Now, once you've done this, you can move into the next phase and these next 6 steps. Create your own vision and mission, so where you want to go. You can do this early on if you'd like, but certainly as you move into your next phase, be crisp about what you're going to do and what you're going to excel at. Develop a web presence so that people know you. That's the best way to get known and for people to find you out. Third thing is publish. You know, the one thing that we were consulted with was make sure that you publish. So probably the best thing that we had ever done to start our consulting group was in 2008, we wrote a book, and it's called The Leader of Oz. We took the story of the Wizard of Oz and wrote a business parable. We took all of our intellectual property, the things that we do about establishing leaders, put it into this book in a very simple, easy-to-read book. We started writing a very academic book for leadership, and it was just so boring that we didn't even want to read it. So we decided, why don't we do something fun that people will read? And of anything to springboard our consulting, we've got the best return on investment. Most of our customers have come from people who have read the book, and about a year ago I was fortunate enough that I was invited to Stanford University to speak at their leadership conference based on the director there that had read the book. So publish, spend 80% of your time selling, 20% developing. We like to develop, but you need to spend most of your time selling. And then create alliances. Go out and find people that are doing things similar. Help them, and they will help you. And the last thing is leverage your clients and success stories. Tell other people how you've been successful. 2 more slides, and then we'll open it up for questions. So finding your SCA. Here's the last stage, which is the ACT piece. What are you passionate about? That is the questions that you want to ask yourself after you finish this call. What knowledge or experience do I have that only a small percentage of people have or that they claim to have? What have I done where I've created some concrete examples to demonstrate my knowledge? So you need to show examples to people so that they're convinced. And what does my unique talent, skill, or experience offer to people or organizations that I want to work for? And then finally, what actions do I need to take to immediately start building this? Do not wait till you're ready for the next phase of your career. Most of the people I consult with who want to do things like Melissa are deciding this after they've lost their job, after they've turned 50, after they're ready. Now is the time to do that. The last piece is assess your progress. And this is the measure piece. And this is the step that is ignored by most people, and the step that really defines the difference between success and failure. If you don't know where you're going, you're definitely going to end up nowhere. So take these 5 steps. Identify your competencies. You need to create a scorecard. Ensure when you get the scorecard, you're capturing both the quantitative as well as the qualitative data. Second question is test for your proficiency. Get out there, and when you test for proficiency, obtain brutal, honest customer and expert feedback. Get people to tell you how well you're doing. In Melissa's situation, she had a lot of people telling her that she was really bad at facilitation, and she hated hearing that, but those are the things that she's worked through, and she's actually become very, very good at, so she can pursue her passion. The fourth is use your measured progress to reanalyze the original assessment. In the ADAM model, go back to the first stage and make the necessary course corrections so that you now reanalyze, redesign, react, and remeasure, and you create this continuous improvement. As we heard from the testimonial, consistency and persistence wins the race. My watch says we have 10 minutes. Okay, and while you're thinking about your questions, I see that there's one question that I had gotten previously. How do you identify, Melissa talked about the different assessments. We have a whole suite of assessment tools that are available in order to evaluate your behaviors, your values, what motivates you, strengths, your leadership proficiency, and there are many organizations that provide these. Melissa mentioned one which is done by the Gallup organization called Strengths Finder, and they have a new book which is also used actually in one of the, surprisingly enough, in one of the Drexel master's classes called Strengths Finder 2. So I'd recommend that. Melissa had done Myers-Briggs and DISC and so forth. So there's lots of things to address the different strengths that you have. Once you've kind of identified your strengths, one of the things you need to figure out is it a unique strength? And how do you know whether your talent or skill is unique? Well, probably the best way is to look around the people that you work with, search the web, how many people are professing the same type of strength. And as I mentioned earlier in one of the slides, is not only do you have to profess the strength, so maybe you say that you're exceptional at facilitation, you're exceptional at organizational development, or you're exceptional at certain engineering design. What do you have tangible that has shown results? Where have you done? So saying, hey, I facilitated 20 classes, that's a whole lot different than saying, hey, I facilitated 20 classes, and each one of those I've retained 95% score of exceptional, or I've attained 98% of everything that was required to meet the objectives for each of those facilitations. Having those type of stories that are both quantifiable and qualifiable will help you position yourself for differentiation.
Kevin, a question that just came in the chat box there. The question is, how do you sell yourself if you're a consultant?
So I'll tell you our story of how we sell ourselves as consultants. We do not go out and do cold calls or selling. We try to work through our networks of people that we've met, conferences, previous customers. Many of our clients have been people that I had worked with through the different companies that I worked for, or even better yet, work with them and they've pointed us to people in their network to go help them. So use your network to make the connections. The one thing that we talk about is one of the constraints that you'll have, or the pushback that you always get when you give them your particular rates, and we usually don't tell them an hourly rate. What we do is we go in and analyze what the value is of the project. If we can save them $50,000, and we can confirm that, and we always do pre-assessments and post-assessments to make sure that they can see the progress. We try to look at what value that is to them, and then we give them a price for the consulting that typically is usually in a 5 to 10 times return on investment. So once again, it's selling your value proposition, and it's not just selling an hourly rate or a daily fee. Question that I had gotten previously, Lauren, about what if you're re-entering the marketplace? Maybe you've been out for some reason that you've had an opportunity, as many of my friends have, to be consulting, consultingmonster.com and Career Builder and so forth for an extended period of time where you've traveled overseas or you're coming back into the workforce after you've started your family. So what tips could I provide there? Take a look at the work that you had done or what had happened during the period where you were out of the workplace and analyze what strengths that you had developed there, bring those back in. What I found works best for people they're interviewing that have been in this situation is go and learn about the jobs that you're applying for. Learn as much about the company, position, do your research, look at competitors, and come in prepared. That's the thing I think that will wow the interviewers probably the most. And don't be afraid to say, hey, this is where I am, this is where I need to be, but these are my talents, these are my proficiencies, and here's how it translates for you. And if anyone would like to contact me, send a note to kevin@magnaleadership.com, or you can reach me in my office here in Phoenix at 623-252-2389. And I see we have about 2 minutes to finish, so we'll let everybody get off to their next meetings or their real work. And I want to say thanks to Lauren and the Alumni Association for letting me do this. And I wish you all luck with creating your sustainable competitive advantage. Please, I love to hear success stories. Drop me a note if you'd like to join our network. We do regular seminars as well as send all the articles that I publish and the other people in my consulting group publish on a regular basis out to you. No spamming, no sales. Like I said, we other organizations to help them be successful, but you won't get any sales calls from me. Thanks again, and I look forward to talking on another seminar.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for your time today, and thanks to everyone who attended. Just a reminder that we do have a variety of career services programs that we offer around the country in person and online, and a list of those is available on our website at drexel.edu/alumni. So thanks again, everyone, for being here today, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care.
All right, bye now.